Well, g'day all, and welcome to episode 5, S-Plasma 101. Now, to pick up from the last episode, you'll recall we left Hickory in quite a tense situation. It was the very first Horde night, but as you'll see, Hickory is quite well prepared. In Hickory's mind, preparation for this night began at day 1. This is an eventuality that everyone from Hickory's time has been well informed about. It is one of those events that everyone knows well enough to prepare for, but hopes will never happen. And as you see here, Hickory already has some deterrent mechanisms in place. There's the wooden spikes and this iron bar walkway giving safe access to the outside. Now, this night has the potential to be a very epic battle. And normally I would set an epic battle like this to some dramatic music. So yeah, that was pretty epic and pretty cool. But I won't be setting this epic battle to any kind of dramatic music, because this battle essentially goes on for half the movie. And if I set the entire battle scene to some good old dramatic music, then I'm not going to be doing much explaining. Pretty much like my other videos, I guess. Anyway, I've turned the volume down on the game's background noises so that the squalling of these foul and belligerent skarken doesn't overpower my melodic and commanding voice whilst I explain all the things. And all of the things, of course, has to be the S-Plasma. So I'm going to get started by going back over each word of the S-Plasma idiom. And then I'll start to scrape away all of the layers of what the S-Plasma actually is and how it works. The S-Plasma idiom actually consists of 5 words: systemic, nano, bioreciprocating, that's a hyphenated word, intramural, plasma. S-N-B-R-I-P. And you should remember that definition from episode 2. And if you don't, I suggest you go back and watch episode 2 again, and episode 3, and episode 4, and episode 1. And don't forget the cell sack. We all love our cell sack. Okay, it's time to get up close and personal with S-Plasma. To start with, I'm going to lay out a few more definitions. Now, this is all fundamental information that you are going to need in order to get a full understanding of S-Plasma, what it is, how it works, and why it does what it does. Nanomites. This is the first topic I'm going to be covering, and you'll probably have a pretty good basic understanding of what nanomites are. But I'm going to cover it regardless. And if you think I'm being boring for doing this, shut up, you're boring too. Nanomites are theoretical, nano-sized robots. Now, they're theoretical because they don't actually exist yet. They do exist in theory, which is why they're theoretical. And yes, it is true that some scientists have made some very rudimentary versions of what you could call nanomites. But in actual reality, science has yet to produce a single working nano-sized robot that is capable of performing any kind of useful task. Doctors are hoping that in the future they'll be able to use these nanomites by releasing them into the bloodstream, where they will combat damaged, diseased or cancerous cells within the human body. So by now I'm fairly confident that you have a reasonably good idea of what nanomites are. And on that point, I'm going to tell you now, nanomites have nothing to do with S-Plasma. Psych. Anyway, seriously, now I'm going to introduce a very similar and yet different idea, and that is bionomites. Alternatively, you could call them bionanomites. Bionomites is my word. Bionanomites is what sciencey people would call them. Now, as the name would suggest, these bionomites perform a very similar function to what a nanomite might do. But that is where the similarity ends. Bionomites are strictly biological. There are no moving parts. They exist at an atomic level. There are no silicon chips. And yet they are programmed. Okay, this isn't working like I'd hoped. This intense skirmish of the Skarken in front of us is way too distracting. I think I'll throw in some epic music over the epic battle scenes, and when things quieten down, then I'll continue with my talkings about the things. So just sit back, relax, and marvel at my unrivaled Skarken slaying skill. Well, and there ends our very first Horde Night. And just as a matter of interest, here's a quick look at the game's stats. You'll see there that the Skark snuffs at the end of the first Horde Night is 190, 55 of which were tonight's snuffs. And reciprocal events, 4. Is Hickory just the best? Yes, because, you know, it do be like that sometimes. Ooh, sneaky, getting in behind there. Take aim and shoot. Good shot. Now shoot again. And now continue to be dead. Very good. So now with that battle in the past, although there's still a lot of cleaning up to do, and the game volume turned way down this time, I can now continue with my developing oration from where I left off. So now why am I talking to you about nanomites and bionomites? What does that have to do with S-plasma? And why are we doing this whole explanation thing anyway? I'm doing this because I'm trying to bring your thinking into alignment with a whole new concept. And that concept is the S-plasma. And the reason I have to do it this way is because S-plasma is a vast, multifaceted, pseudoscientific oddity. The bionomites are just one of those facets. Some of the other things that I will be explaining, hopefully in this video, are something that I call QCN, quantum computing nodes, dark matter and how it's associated with the QCNs, something called temporal swing equipment and what the temporal swing is, and something that I call Akashic data. You will have heard that in spiritual circles. Spiritual people will talk about the Akashic records. That's only part of the story. The Akashic records are a reality. They exist. But the thing that I call Akashic data is vastly more complex than the Akashic records, and I'll be attempting to explain that as well. Now, before I get into explaining any more on the S-plasma, I want to take some time here to say a really big thank you to Little Paper Bees for your gift of a Blue Yeti microphone. Thank you. Before this, I had a $15 cheapie that I'd acquired I don't know where from. But if you put the two together, you can see the comparative difference between the two. And I'm pretty sure you'll hear the comparative difference in the voiceover. I know it's made a big difference in my recording times because I don't have to do so many retakes just to get the sound right. It works first time, every time. So many thanks to Little Paper Bees. So now, back to the explanationing. I think I should probably cover the Akashic data next. That's probably the thing that you're going to have most questions about. So to start with, Akashic data is intrinsically axiomatic. And what that means is it can't be denied, it can't be argued with. You can ignore it, but you cannot avoid it. The Akashic data is what it is, and it can be nothing else. Now that's a very vague description of what the Akashic data is. Now I'm going to give you a much more in-depth explanation. So to begin with, I'm going to take you back to the time you were born. As a baby, you were a completely blank slate. You were aware of nothing. You were barely even aware of your own existence. But somehow your body knew how to yawn, knew how to sneeze, cough, and cry. It knew how to swallow, process food, and grow. So from this, it's clear that some information is pre-programmed. Now that programming has to come from somewhere, from a body of knowledge that pre-exists. As time passes by, you slowly become more and more aware of the physical existence that you are now part of. You didn't put that existence there. You are just becoming more aware of that which is already in existence. Science is doing the same thing. It's not creating any of the laws of the universe. Science merely discovers what is already there and then endeavors to explain it. Science isn't, doesn't, and cannot create the laws of physics. Science is only an observer. It can only discover that which is already there. This is the Akashic data. All of the information, the entirety of the physical universe, all the mathematical calculations that govern how a body will move in space, all the laws of physics that dictate gravity, all of the laws of the universe that cannot be broken. All were in existence long before man came along. The universe has been utilizing them for eons. All that the human race ever did was discover that information that pre-existed. And that is the Akashic data. The Akashic data is the entirety of all knowledge in existence. It is that which cannot be denied. Now, that's the Akashic data in a nutshell, and yet that is just a rough summary of what I consider to be a vast thesis. So I'm going to have to cover this topic many more times in future episodes. And just in case there is anyone thinking, oh wow, he's talking about God. No, shut your face, he is not talking about God. The Akashic data is not God, and God is not the Akashic data. You can make up your own stories about God. This is my story. So now, for the sake of a pig's curly tail, I'm going to talk about the QCNs, the quantum computing nodes, keeping in mind, of course, that this is all part of the S-plasma. Now, if you'll think back to episode 2, when I was first explaining the S-plasma, I mentioned that part of the S-plasma was computational, and this is where the quantum computing nodes come in, of course. But first, a little digression before I get into that. It goes without saying at this point, all of these exceptional scientific advancements are obviously the work of our 4 heroes, the 4 outstanding scientists that I've been blathering about since the beginning, the original free radicals. And this is also the reason they are the heroes of the story. They are the ones who made everything within the game world possible. So now back to the quantum computing nodes. Let me start by talking about your blood. Your blood consists of 4 main elements. You have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. They make up 45% of your blood. The other 55% is the plasma. That plasma contains proteins. Those proteins are made up of amino acids, and each of those amino acids carry within it at least 1 hydrogen atom. And it's those hydrogen atoms that the 4 scientists have hybridized and formed what they called quantum computing nodes. And that's where the second word in the idiom comes in, nano, being those atom-sized computing nodes. Now at this stage, let's go back over the idiom and see which words I have explained and which ones I have yet to explain. The first word, systemic. That's explained by the atomic size of the computing nodes. Because these computing nodes exist as hydrogen molecules within the plasma, that gives the plasma the ability to permeate every system within the human body, making it systemic. The second word in the idiom is nano. That, of course, is referring once again to the atomic size of the computing nodes. And I think I should mention at this stage that these are only the computing nodes. These are not the bionomites. The bionomites will have their own explanation in their own time, in another video. But for now, I have yet to explain the bioreciprocating part and the intramural part of the idiom. I believe I have explained the plasma part by the fact that the computing nodes are fabricated using hydrogen atoms within the plasma of your blood. I would like to get those other 2 explained now, but it's not going to happen because there's only a few minutes left in this video. So what explanation-y thing can I squeeze in before the end? And don't worry, if you're not understanding some of this stuff, I will be going into it in much, much more detail eventually. But for now, I think I have time to explain just one more thing quickly. So lay back, put your feet up, pour yourself a nice sherry, and let's talk about dark matter. There is a lot of dark matter in our universe. Scientists actually estimate that there is 5 times more dark matter in our universe than there is regular matter. And here's a few interesting facts about dark matter. It doesn't reflect light, so you can't see it. That's why they call it dark matter. But it does interact gravitationally with regular matter. And there's one more thing that I found particularly interesting. If you run out and get yourself a good telescope, and by good I mean Kepler standard, one that's going to give you a really close look at galaxies, and then just sit and watch how the galaxy moves. A galaxy is a spiral, and normally a spiral will move much faster in the center than it does at the outside. You'll see that evidenced in whirlpools. A whirlpool travels a lot faster in the center than it does at the outside. Galaxies don't do that. The spin of a galaxy is almost unified, which means the stars at the outer edge are traveling at astronomically faster speeds than the stars in the center of the galaxy. The galaxy moves as a unit, and the force responsible for that anomaly is dark matter. So now, why on earth am I blathering on about dark matter and galaxies? The answer to that question brings us back to the Akashic data. Now remember, the Akashic data is all the information, all the scientific principles, all the mathematical calculations, all that information that is there for science to discover. It had to pre-exist in order for it to have been discovered. Let's use the analogy of an undiscovered country. It exists somewhere on the planet. The explorer sets out. Maybe he has an idea that the country is there, but he doesn't know. It's just a theory. He travels far and wide, and eventually he discovers the country. That country was there before he discovered it. It pre-existed somewhere. It's the same principle with the Akashic data. It exists somewhere. It has to, in order for it to be discovered. The rules of the universe are the rules of the universe. They've always been there. They all have an existence before they're discovered, which means they must be written somewhere. And that brings us full circle back to the dark matter. Dark matter is the material on which the Akashic data is written. Or to say it another way, dark matter is the circuit board on which the program of the universe runs. The Akashic data, of course, being the program. And regrettably, that brings us to the end of this episode. I look forward to seeing you next time. This is the end of episode 5. There is still so much more to come. You should join me again in the next episode. If you enjoyed my video, please do all the things. That is, salsack, share and like, subscribe and comment. I love when people salsack me.